live. We got the virtual town hall here streaming. I'm James Manus, and beside me I have Mr. Sean Donovan.
Mm-hmm.
And I appreciate Sean taking his time to join me tonight here. The last one was I guess Sean, you'd say much better. I guess it was much better attended than I really thought it was going to be. So it really turned out well. I thought so.
Yeah.
And a lot of positive feedback. I think a lot of people really joined. And this feedback I got was really positive. They said the dynamic worked well. I like the question and answer thing. One of my goals with this one, and I think we put the time frame on this for an hour, would really be to try to, I guess, shorten these, and for myself to do them more often. Do more often and a little shorter, and I think that's probably easier for people to stomach and digest as we move through this. But tonight, obviously we have got the stream going here, and if you've got questions, we will do our best to answer them. Any questions I don't know, I'll defer to Sean.
Yeah, I have all the answers.
But anything, if you get a question, just throw it over there in the comments saying if something comes up, do let us know, and whatever, just feel free to chime in. We've got kind of a little pseudo agenda to work through here, but I'm really anxious to kind of get through that, give my spiel, and get on to maybe some questions that the people out there watching have, or comments or feedback, and just go through those.
I had a lot of good questions last time. Hopefully we get the same responses this time.
Really impressed with the feedback on that. And for me, if you haven't signed up, of course on the website it's just jamesmanus.com. If you haven't signed up there, there's a newsletter on it. And it really gives me some of the questions give me some stuff to come back out there. It's like what people are interested in, and seeing what's on people's mind and really answering that for the newsletter really helps. And so I'd say again, appreciate it and appreciate the comments that you have on here. The first thing, and I want to just jump right in here on it, was the automatic license plate readers. And as you know, if you follow the news, Mount Juliet has selected a vendor on those. Those were part of the 2019-2020 budget. And when they first came out, I have to admit, I was a little skeptical on this.
Yeah. And
it come about through the discussion. It's like, what are we trying to accomplish? What are the needs here on it? And one of the things that really excited me about it was, and it's a problem, and I know you live in the neighborhood next door to me, and one of the problems that I see that's going on is we have a lot of activity that goes on surrounding Mount Juliet with criminal activity.
Yeah.
A lot of times concerning minors, where they're grabbing cars, going into our community, and they're going through unlocked cars, looking for unlocked cars, or maybe even breaking into cars, but they're using stolen vehicles to do it.
Exactly. Yeah.
And when they're confronted, they just scatter. They have nothing to on here. The vehicle is stolen. But props to our police department, because one of the things we have seen is decline in that. But this was another opportunity, another tool that we could put in our police department's hands to be able to address that.
Yeah.
And we see other communities out there that have made use of this, like Hendersonville, Belmead, Franklin, Nashville Airport, the Tennessee Highway Patrol has mobile units. Lebanon is using mobile units. And we brought out some test units and had great results with the test units so far on it. But saying all that, that's the positives. Now, one of my immediate negatives that I saw with it was the privacy concerns.
Yeah, which was posted a lot. A lot of people had concerns about the privacy and what exactly the goal of the whole system was, or the whole program was. But I think we've had some good hits there, call it good successes there so far, even in that pilot program, where we're able to identify a couple vehicles coming out of Nashville and Davidson County. So it was having Lebanon Road as a major arterial coming in from Davidson County into Wilson County, and Mount Juliet definitely have a lot of traffic coming in and out.
Oh, definitely.
Here. So,
yeah, and one of the goals was to protect the entrances coming into the city on this. And the police department is calling this program Guardian Shield, which is in fact what it's doing. It's looking, and what we're looking for on those things is license plates that have pretty much been identified by the TBI. That's the only source I know of that are getting on the list, called a hot list. And this is where other municipalities are reporting these on a hot list. And once they get in the database, the cameras are just reading the tags as they pass to look for matches on those things.
Yeah.
Now, that's all good, and technology's great, and I've fed my family in the technology field now for several years, so I like technology. But sometimes I also have concerns when it comes to technology. One of the first places I went is I go to the internet and I say, well, I'm probably not the only one. And I Google and I start researching around, and there's other sites out there, and I see they voice similar concerns. What happens to the data? Who's got the data?
That's very valid. Yeah.
Who's controlling the data? And I look at what's out there, and if you start looking across states and cities and municipalities, it's all across the board.
Yeah.
And I saw one in Texas where they were sharing data with, I want to say, like 600 different entities.
Oh my gosh.
And I was like, is that a full-time employee to just track that?
Very much would need that for that many sources there, yeah, for sure.
And some of the complaints were centered around that. Some of them were, it wasn't clear where they were sharing with private entities, marketing companies, or whatever. And so one of the first things I did, sit down, I was like, if this is the path we want to go forward with it, I don't want to be in support of something and not be able to explain to somebody what we're doing with data.
Definitely a transparency thing, that you want to be as transparent as possible to the citizens that are funding this program, and I think that's
just
the thing is you just want to be as transparent as possible to let the citizens know that it's a safety concern. It's more for safety related than anything else, and be as transparent as possible.
So I looked around and I saw the complaints that were out there, and I just made a list, just simple as that. And I started looking around at other legislation in other cities and other states and what they were doing, and put together Ordinance 2019-40, and this was passed back in August. Of course, this was two readings on this, public hearings on the privacy aspect. As after the public hearings on the actual budget where the camera system was introduced, and of course we'll have another public hearing on the resolution once we settle on the vendor. Now, the vendor is selected, but in order to adopt that contract, it'll have to come back to the Board of Commissioners, be voted. The contract has to be voted on again, which will give people another opportunity to weigh in. But before we selected a vendor or made any commitments on it, the first thing we did was we sought out and writing Ordinance 2019-40, and basically it took what the state already has, but the state legislation specifically deals with fixed cameras.
Okay.
And so we took the fixed camera system, and this is all feedback working with our police department, very helpful through this process. They thought of a lot of things that just never even occurred to me. I mean, I had my list, and they're like, well, what about this? What about this? This is, because, I mean, this is the same goal. They have to answer the same questions that I do as to what we're doing with this stuff.
Yeah.
So one of the things we did was we first of all said, we're going to make it apply to mobile and stationary units, adopting the state statute that says 90 days, and we're going to make that a city ordinance. And one of the reasons why, if the state's already doing it, if the state changed it, I wanted it in law at the city level. So an elected official here would have to institute the change. Now, credit to the police department, they've come back and I'm now doing an internal policy that says we won't retain any data over 30 days unless it is associated with an active criminal investigation. So that was the first thing, and I was really pleased when they did that.
Yeah.
The other piece is specifically wanted to outlaw the using these cameras in any way for traffic enforcement. Now, they're not built to do that, whether it's speed cameras, red light cameras, outlawing that from the get-go before any contracts were signed.
Yeah.
I don't believe it was ever in the intention of anybody to ever bring that red light camera back, the red light
cameras back.
Yeah, the program there.
Yeah.
I don't think that was ever anyone's intention, but that was one of the first goals, was to make sure that we had it captured, black and white on paper, city ordinance, and that was not going to be part of it.
Good. Excellent.
And the other thing was just we not retaining any data that's not associated with a criminal investigation. The other pieces were outlawing of the sharing of the data with private companies, marketing companies, outlawing the selling of the data. And the third one was limiting the sharing of the data to law enforcement agencies within the state of Tennessee. And then I want to take it a step further. Any entity that they're sharing data with from a data gathering information for criminal purposes only has to be publicly noticed on the city website.
Yeah.
So
Excellent.
those were the things that we put in place before the program was even going. And we haven't even signed the contract yet. We selected the vendor, but the
Yeah.
contract's there.
Yeah.
So to me, it was really important to get ahead of that.
And it sounds like Chief Hambrick and his staff have really been proactive on getting a list of things and have almost going higher, going above even what we're
yes.
asking for of using it as much transparency as possible. So that's really kudos to him and his staff for sure.
And I mean, for the program we're putting in, this is an annual contract. So we're doing this, and I don't know if you work in maybe IT or business, something you've heard the term software as a service, platform as a service.
Yeah.
So this is as service offering to the city. We're not hiring somebody in the city to go around and put these cameras up somewhere
Okay.
and maintain the cameras.
So they take care of the installation and everything.
They take care of the installation, the storage, all the work around it associated with it. They're taking care of that.
Yeah.
So we're signing an annual contract. So if we don't get the results we want out of this, we're not on the hook. We're not out any long-term expenses on this thing. It's just
excellent.
we don't continue the program.
Yeah. Good.
And we're expecting to see results from this. We've already seen it off the demo units.
Yeah. We had a couple of those hits there that were definitely helped the situation.
I think within the first week we had a hit. Just
Down
down
in
here.
Providence, wasn't it?
Well, we had one in front of Mount Juliet Elementary.
Okay.
Coming down
Yeah,
Division
that's true.
Street.
Yeah, going right at the city limits there.
And then of course we recovered the guy who was, I guess right we said Franklin Police was after.
Yeah.
Covered him.
Yeah, for the domestic. Yeah.
Somebody made the joke, there was a Crime Stoppers reward for him. It's like, this program will pay for itself. I
Don't have to pay any fines. They're
don't
rewards.
know if we get to
Yeah, I
collect
don't know about
the
that,
Crime
yeah.
Stoppers
Exactly.
money off that or not, but
Yeah.
That's
Might be in the fine print of the contract with the Guardian Shield Company,
split the
They get the
split
money.
crime, yeah.
They get the fees for any kind of Crime Stopper rewards. They get that.
But
So, anyway.
I'm expecting big things out of this program. I'm expecting to see that our trends with crime that we see dipping already in this city and have been, I believe, for the last several years,
Oh, for sure.
are going to continue to dip. And to me, I think word will get out in short order once the first few come into the city. Right? And the way the system works is it's going to flag if something comes across there. It could be an Amber Alert.
Yeah.
It could be missing, somebody missing or whatever. It's going to flag them when they come into the city. If it's flagged as a stolen car, they're going to flag it when it comes in there.
Okay.
And it's going to relay the information to the officer right there in his car.
Okay. Just like an Amber Alert or
Oh, yes.
anything, just the same kind of
come
thing,
right
like
out
you
the
said. Okay. That's excellent with the CAD. Makes it one less thing the CAD system has to worry about,
Yeah.
too.
And
So-
our police department's hard at work right now on upgrading their CAD system, which is the computer-aided dispatch. If
Your aid
wonder-
dispatch, yeah.
If you're wondering what we're working, and I mean that's something
The
you
fire
work with on
department. Yeah,
a
the fire
daily
department
basis
uses it
too.
as well, so
The dispatch system. So
excellent.
that was the first thing out there. And I don't know if anybody's got any comments or questions on that, but I just wanted to jump in right on that with the automatic license plate readers that we're putting in, and I think it's really going to be a big improvement and a nice tool for our police department.
For sure. I got one question here.
Yeah, it's on my list. I will jump to it on that one. The other
All
one,
right.
the second one I want to get to is the lights, the Little League lights. We had a
Yes,
meeting
little-
last.
Yeah,
little
that's
meeting
been a
last
very
night.
interesting topic
Yes,
for you.
it has been. We had a meeting last night. Ultimately, it was deferred. We made several changes to the ordinance on it. The written agreement really wasn't in place in a situation that we were ready to vote on it if we had chosen to. But after making 4 changes to the ordinance of that, we deferred it a week. We will meet again on the 21st. And by doing the deferral, lets me get back with the Parks Board and get their input on it. They had rejected the first offer, and I wasn't at the meeting, but I understand it was a unanimous vote to reject the first offer.
Okay.
And I think with the changes that we put in Monday night, might make it a little more palatable for them. So we'll get their feedback on that, and hopefully something we can get to the next meeting on it, either get some closure on it. We had a second reading last night on the settlement with the school board over the liquor lawsuit, which is now settled. For me, it's like the 45th vote or something to settle the thing. So.
Yeah. Been going on for a couple of years.
Oh, it's
or
been-
not. How many years would you say that's been going?
Not quite 5.
I'm going for 5. Okay. About 5.
So That was put to rest with a final agreed number on it last night. That was brought down a little bit from the judgment order.
Yeah.
And they'll see all that, and it's going to the school systems, and we know the schools can get it. Right now, I don't know how old your boys are, but
Yeah.
I got one in middle school, so it's like our last conversation at night. It's like, do you think there'll be a school bus tomorrow?
That's been a constant issue. It's been a constant issue with the shortage of bus drivers in Wilson County.
Yeah.
I know they're trying their best to get those in place because I know we continue to have cancellations for bus routes at the middle school. I don't know so much about the high school, but I know the middle school and the elementary school for Mount Juliet Elementary, they've had some issues there. So.
And I bring that up. It's not necessarily something the city does. The city doesn't do any of the operations of the school or the running of the school in any way. But I've had some people reach out to me on it, and I'm like, I don't have the exact answers on what's going on. I'm trying to find out myself, but I'm kind of in the same boat. It's like every night waiting for the text message to come in,
waiting for the next alert or the automated phone call from the district. Yeah,
it's really I tend to think of it as the downside of a very good economy right now. Is there's in some ways there's more jobs sometimes than there are people to work on.
Absolutely.
So. And
going back to the light thing before we move on to the next thing, what were some of the highlights of the changes that were required from, you would say, the first reading? Because I know it was kind of the first proposal that was given at the first reading was kind of
the first
ballpark. Some of these, there wasn't a lot of specifics, I guess, if you want to call it that.
Yeah, the first round it was like a 30-year loan.
Yeah,
and it wasn't really paying it back in the sense of we'll write you a check for the payback. We will take grants money, but the problem is you can't guarantee that there's going to be grants money every year. You just don't know. But so taking the grants money, we'll just, in lieu of the grants money, that account as our payment. So eventually, over 30 years, the loan would just go away.
Yeah,
and
well, after the point that all of us are gone, and
yeah, it was 30 years. I mean, I'll be 42 by then.
Yeah, I'm going to be 22 in 30 years. Yeah, I keep going down in age.
But what we got now on the table is a 10-year loan.
Okay.
So repayment over 10 years, which coincides with the fact that the lights that the ballpark is after has a 10-year maintenance warranty on.
Oh, okay.
So once the loan's paid back, then the maintenance. They've got a great deal of maintenance expense already at the ballpark on that. That could offset the maintenance costs that they're spending on it, would just about cover some of the cost on it, reduced electricity to cover the cost. So getting it down to 10 years on that made sense. And then it was an agreement on that it would actually be a payment back. The other thing that was changed was the money that's proposed, the loan from, is coming from our hotel motel tax, which is money that's earmarked for capital improvements for the park.
Yeah.
It's really important to me that once the payments come back, that it went back to the park system.
Exactly.
So that money that's earmarked there, we have it when we want to move on land purchases for the park, expanding the park system.
Yeah.
There was discussion about aquatic centers and stuff like that money go back to where it was designated to.
Yeah.
That
well, and I can see that thing. And I think that was a major key point, was that I don't think it was one of those things that, say, the Board of Commissioners or there's somebody out there who was against, sports or, youth sports in the city. I think if anything, everybody's very supportive and wants more. And that's what the good thing with like you said, with the economy. There's a lot of kids playing. Not everybody's playing baseball. Not everybody's playing football. You have ones who are, like you said, the aquatic center, that discussion with the swimming and things like that. So just looking at it and soccer is another one that's a big sport in West Wilson, that I think it just is. Everybody has kind of that option to have that kind of thing, like that option to get a loan if they want to look at something like that. But definitely making sure the money goes back into the park system, like you said.
Yeah, and if that money is ever used for something else, which right now by ordinance it's locked for there, that should be the discussion later on, and not have it just move around on paper and lose it in the process.
Sure.
So that was one thing that I wanted to make sure was accounted for in it. The other was there was some discussion about a previous grant to the same project, made sure that got accounted for in this. And I think I covered the changes there. There were 4 of them.
Okay.
But the terms of the loan, that was actually in the agreement offer. But the terms, the repayment going back to the same source, the guaranteed cash payment, and the and the fact that the default that it would be interest charged back on that because it's an interest-free loan.
Yeah.
But there has to be something in there to make sure that the taxpayers get their money back.
yeah, absolutely.
Ultimately on this.
Especially, a lot of people look at Mount Juliet Little League. It still is a private, technically. It's a private corporation. It's not, or private. What is it? An LLC.
It's a nonprofit.
Nonprofit. So, it's not a city-funded park. There's a lot of people who may think that Mount Juliet Little League's a city park, but it's technically
It's
not.
Little,
it is not.
Not Little League.
It's not Little League.
It's not Little League. Baseball. Our baseball league.
Okay, good. I'm glad you corrected me.
I get corrected.
But
and I did it last night on the public, and I hope
I guess
nobody.
that's what most people know it as. I guess
it is, and it was known
younger
after
kids.
that. And
Yeah.
I did it on the public announcement last night, and I'd hope nobody noticed, and they all let me know that they did. So I was like, you won't get a pass either. So.
Yeah. Well, sorry to everybody who's watching from the Baseball Association. I don't want to offend anybody.
I know that. Yeah. Well, you've not offended anybody any more than I have.
Okay, it's a redheaded thing, I guess.
It is. It's a redhead correlation here.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's good.
So that'll move on, be back the 21st. I believe there's a tentative meeting with the Parks Board on Thursday to discuss before the Planning Commission.
Yeah.
That'll be Charlie Daniels, and I'll get these dates once they are firmly locked in on my website on the calendar there too.
But like the Parks Board, like if the items come to there, are they similar to say like the different committees that they get a positive recommendation on things? So if something's given to them as whatever the project is, they give a positive recommendation to the Board of Commissioners, and then it goes from there. Is that how that process works?
It does.
Okay.
A lot of times our Parks Director will just bring things to them for us. Policy that's set at the Parks level.
Sure.
Or discussions about events. When we had Celebrate Mount Juliet, the Parks Board put a lot of effort into making sure that was organized, and a lot of them did a ton of the volunteer work on that. So, I mean, they're kind of the unsung heroes that they don't get any discussion usually.
Yeah.
And a lot of those people have been on that board for, years.
Okay.
Like 5, 6, 7, 8 years, probably even longer in some cases, that have been there on that thing, and they've been meeting, every couple of months on this thing and discussing stuff. And for us to be at a point now where we've, kind of gathered some money off the hotel, the tax on that, and that was passed. I'm not even gonna guess, but it was before I was in office when that hotel motel tax was set aside just for capital improvements with the Parks Department.
Yeah.
And they've been working hard with plans and plan things on this thing, and it's finally getting to the point to where there may be something where we can talk about making some moves in the future. Of course, that's all dependent upon the will of the Board of Commissioners and what they'll do, but they're finally getting a piece on this thing, and it's just for me, with all the effort that they put into it, the hours that they volunteer, it's just important to get their feedback on this thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think any committee that you have a volunteer committee that's made up of the citizens of Mount Juliet, you want to kind of see a return for your time commitment, and you want to see that your voice is heard, for all the hours that you dedicate to these committees. So that's excellent to see that's happening.
And I mean, having more people brought to the table out there and fresh ideas and people to look things over and there's just a wisdom, and a multitude there to come back.
I think that's a good thing with the growing, not to interrupt you, but seeing with the growing city that when you have a lot of new people coming in every day, calling Mount Juliet home, and a lot of people come from different areas, that they may have different ideas. Not that the long-term residents don't, it's a good thing to have a kind of those kind of discussions to see what we can do to make the city better, and just keep continually giving those opportunities to the residents. So.
Definitely, and I mean it's to me the things that really get me, I guess, excited about my role in the city is not as much about what I'm taking on today or what I'm doing, but where I'm positioning the city to be in 10 years.
Exactly.
And that is sometimes a harder sell because you're trying to wrangle multiple visions into one direction. So I know there's been a lot of playoff 2020 vision and the vision for the city on that thing, but that's something that's been really important to me for the last couple of years on this thing. And it was more so, when I first got elected, it was like, I'm going in and, these red light cameras are coming down. I mean, that was goal number one.
That's your task right there.
That was my goal number one.
It's your platform.
You get in there and a year into office, you get it done. And then and the next thing you know, it's more into fire.
Yeah.
Where's our fire, and where are we at? We still have the same service that we had in 1986, and here it is 2011, and we have the exact same service, and the city's doubled, tripled, quadrupled in size.
Yeah.
Taking that issue on, and going from that, and now we're starting. And I really feel, Sean, and it may not always feel this way to everybody, but I really feel like we're starting to get some traction on that, on the message of fire service.
Yeah.
How we fund the fire department, and going into it. And the wonderful thing about 2020 is it's also an election year.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So when you have politicians, it's always best to try to fix these issues before you go to the polls.
That's right.
I mean, it's just how things work.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
You want those things like we've discussed in the past. The city services that people sometimes might not know. That the fire department's not properly funded, or these different things that they aren't aware of that, but a lot of those comes up as hot button topics during election years when people start asking more questions and what the plans are for those people, the persons that are either in office, incumbents, or the ones who are looking to run against them. What's their ideas to solve some of these issues? So.
And that come up in the discussion with, are we going to be getting into the banking system and making a loan to this? And it's one of the discussions like, well, Mount Juliet is not funding youth sports to the tune that other cities are. My question is, well, what is Mount Juliet funding above the average on this? And no one rushed to answer that question.
Yeah.
And I mean, we do a lot of things well, but there's a lot of things that we could improve on.
Yeah.
And my point was, Lebanon, Mount Juliet, similar sized cities, similar populations. Yeah. But when it comes to spending on emergency services, and particularly with fire service, the city of Lebanon is paying $228 per person, while you got the city of Mount Juliet paying $71.
$71, yeah.
So there's a big discrepancy there.
Yeah. Well, and it's when you look at the cities and you want to make them apples to apples. I guess you look at it that way and say, well, what are the citizens that are of similar sizes, like Lebanon, which being there, our Wilson County city right next to us. What services are they receiving that we're not? And if we're not receiving the same level of services, in particular the fire service, or PD and different parks and all these different things, those are questions that the citizens and the residents deserve. We should have a voice to ask those questions, and it shouldn't be that this is just the way it is, or those kinds of things.
I just remember from my own journey, I guess, in this, when I'm first running for office, and I'm walking every door in this district here. No one mentioned fire. No one mentioned emergency services, really. Let's talk about some speeders or something.
Yeah.
But I remember I knocked about every single door in District 2, and this might have been my second round on this thing, and I knock on the door, and the guy comes to the door, and he asks me the question. He says, what about fire protection for my mother who lives in Providence? And I'm just like, what about you?
Yeah, what about you? Yeah.
And it got so focused on that, I was like, the whole city as a whole. And it's like, and I know it may not seem that way, but I just hear more and more like it's picking up steam, like the level of service that we have is not where we need to be at a city this size. No. And not taking away from anything our firemen do and our fire department does now. Do an excellent job.
No. And that's the thing is that firefighters and being a career firefighter, as you know, and being in the fire service a long time, we do the best with what we have.
Exactly.
But we also realize, and it's kind of our responsibility as residents as well as elected officials, to make sure we're safe. We're safe. When we're approving, I'll just use Amazon because that's one of the major projects we approve. You approve commercial buildings like in that size. When we're looking at it's coming out saying we're going to go ahead and build the largest building in the state of Tennessee, or square footage.
One of the largest in the country.
In the country, but yet nothing's been discussed about, okay, what are we doing to add to the fire protection? We look at Bradshaw Farms is another community that's coming, that's coming up to there, and everybody wants to build in Mount Juliet because you see it everywhere in the news saying it's the best city in the state of Tennessee and different things like that. But as we bring this growth in, it's excellent, but we also have to, like we've always said, the infrastructure. But that involves the fire protection. For everyone, every new building that comes here, commercial building, every new home that's built, it just adds to that workload to the fire department.
It's really getting ahead of where it is instead of using growth to fund current operations.
Yes,
using
exactly.
money from growth to fund infrastructure.
Sure.
One-time money for one-time expenses. Because the thing about one-time money is you get it one time.
Yeah, and that's it.
At some point, it stops in Mount Juliet or slows, and then that could either come from the economy or just there's not a desire for the land here any longer. I don't foresee that happening anytime soon.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we can't be almost have an addiction to one-time money coming in, then it drops off.
Exactly.
And where are we left with operations cost if we're using one-time money to fund operations?
That's right.
Then we have a deficit in operations, and then we don't have the infrastructure pieces in there that could have been done from the one-time money.
Which I completely agree. You hear out there that growth, it should pay for itself. People will say that part of it. But like you said, a lot of that money comes in initially as capital, and you make your capital purchases, and you can buy a lot of things. You can build fire stations, and you can build, buy more police cars and all those different things. But capital expenses, we don't use those for personnel expense. So you can't use that capital money to pay the salary for those firefighters to make sure we're properly staffed. Do we have enough police officers there? So you're not going to go ahead after an Amazon and say, you got to give us X amount of money every year to pay for
And that was
more firefighters.
And that was the thing, as you well know, the budget for emergency services last year's budget from fire was $500,000 or $500,000 short in the difference between what the property tax brought in and what it cost to run. And that's not to say that there's been overages on that, because the budget from the fire department has always come in under budget and on time. It's just the Board of Commissioners had asked the fire department to spend more than they brought in, and you hope the gap would close. But as we got close to 2017, it's when I first brought this up, that the gap's not closing fast enough, or we're wanting more services and voting as a body for more services to be offered than what the tax is sustaining. We didn't make any adjustments to the taxes out there.
No.
But after that stopped, we put in another tax. I call it shadow tax.
Shadow tax.
Because it's a one-time tax, and it's put on new construction, I think. And that's good when you do capital cost. But this tax is going to operational.
Yeah. And that's the thing, is that and most people don't know, and unless you were really involved in the whole funding, or you were back in 2013 when we started funding, looking at the fire department, when the original tasking for the fire department was to a one-station fire department that was on the south side, and within a year we realized, and rightfully so, as most taxpayers asked, expanding the fire department, because it was like District 1, Commissioner Justice's constituents, and District 2 weren't receiving the same level of service as the residents on the south side. So we expanded it, and being on the fire department at the time, expanded services, but yet we were almost status quo on our budgets. We weren't given, our growth we weren't funded properly, and still to this day aren't funded properly, as we've discussed. So,
but I really think it's picking up the steam to really put fire service in with the rest of the way we service emergency services, the way other cities do it, and just prioritize the city's expenditures around those things.
Sure. And I think with the people, like the individuals we have, say the finance director with Dana being, finance director, and coming from Hendersonville, and these people. Hi, Dana. A call out for her too. In place, and coming from progressive towns like, say, Hendersonville, that's a growing city as well, like she did. We utilize those strengths and a lot of those people in finance to really kind of fund the fire department properly.
Yeah, and it's in speaking back with some of the early discussions going on to this, probably back 12, 11 or so.
Sure.
The goal was never to see how much you could spend on it, obviously, but see how much you could get for it, and actually proposing a different format than what was typically out there with the combination department, utilizing the volunteers.
Yeah.
So, I talk about the funding differences. The goal is not to see if you can spend as much as another city.
No.
But get it out there, be able to get the initial tack out to it, and then able to have enough people on scene within 10 or 15 minutes with volunteers.
Well,
to
and
do
that's
what we
the
need
thing,
to do.
is just treating it like we could go back to the Guardian system and things like that, where you want to be as transparent as possible. And the way I look at emergency services, and I know we've discussed this offline in the past, is that I don't look at, especially being my profession, is that I don't look at emergency services being one of those things that you skimp on.
Yeah.
You don't skimp on emergency services. You don't skimp on PD. You don't skip
roads,
on
public works.
Yeah, all those different things. Those things that are providing a valid service. You don't skimp on those things. But also saying that you want to be conservative in your spending and make sure you're getting the best conservative. You don't want to be basically a slush fund and just throwing all kinds of money into something. You definitely want to. And it's like training. I always used when I was with the fire department talking about training. You don't want to sit there and skimp on training. Training is one of those areas too that you sit there and look at it. Fire protection, all these different things that you want to spend the money because you want to give the best services possible to the residents.
Yeah, I mean, if you just go look at the trucks that you guys drive, and I mean,
We were, yeah,
Just
that I was driving.
well, I mean, in your profession
Yeah.
in general. I mean, the
The
trucks that
apparatus.
drive the apparatus. I mean, you've got the pump on that thing,
Sure.
just operating the pump. I remember showing somebody to it, and they go, "Oh my gosh, what do you do?" And I was like, "It's like a big math equation. I
Yeah,
mean, you're
absolutely.
balancing water flowing through this thing,
Sure.
and you either give one guy too much, not enough, or something, and you get people in trouble real quick."
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, and that's why, if you look at it, how we spent so much money when I was the training officer with FDMJ, spending so much money sending people to school. So we had the highest trained firefighters that we were. It wasn't one of those things that we wanted to get the bare minimum. We wanted top-notch people, both in the paid staff and the volunteer staff. So.
Well, there's just two points to that. One, these guys are being trained to operate a piece of equipment that's, in some cases, some of the equipment's like $1 million piece of equipment
Yeah.
if you went out and replaced it today.
Absolutely.
And so you don't want somebody on there just learning on the job. What's this
No.
do? Drop the pump out of the thing. And you especially don't want to do that when someone's house is on fire.
No.
The other thing is you don't want people learning on the job necessarily when it comes to a 911 emergency response call either.
No. Well, and I think a lot of the people who really had a vested interest in emergency services, both PD and really the fire department, we're looking at it as, do you feel comfortable these people responding to your family? I've always looked at it that way as a firefighter here, that you looked at the individuals and said, okay, do I train because I know these people are going to be responding to my family. So if you think of it and those kind of things, those kind of a viewpoint that way, you want to give them the best because, like you said, they're driving around $1 million. I always joke around about it, and, joke in a certain way of saying it. We're driving around $1 million company cars. If you have an apparatus, but that if something happens to the apparatus, we break the apparatus, or for whatever reason, that's $1 million we have to find in a conservative city if we have to replace it. If you look at certain things, so.
Yeah, and we have responsibility to the taxpayers.
Absolutely.
That does not happen.
And that's why we hire the best. You try to hire the best personnel that you can, and keep employed here the best personnel that you can because they have that vested interest and that interest that way.
And I'll say again with what the fire department, Mount Juliet Fire Department, has done with and they've been good stewards of the resources that they have.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
I got just praise for the guys. They've been obviously some organizational changes, and they've weathered those.
Yeah.
So
Well, and that's a fire, and like I said, that's the fire service, the American fire service, really in general, is that's one good thing about the fire service. If you hire the right people, you put people in good positions. Normally, they're going to deal with adversity, and most of the people who are firefighters are problem solvers. So you give them a bunch of lemons, they make a lemonade and do the best they can. But we shouldn't have to make them do more with less all the time, and have to think about it. Especially with staffing. I always look at the staffing. is one of those key areas that we really need to boost our staffing for the amount of people that we have here. Comparison to Lebanon, like you use Lebanon as an example, when their population is similar to our size, and we do comparisons to manpower staffing there, it's pretty significant.
Our whole department is one shift.
Yes.
There.
Yeah, it's one.
They run 3 shifts.
One crew.
So,
one crew. Yeah.
So I mean, it's just the comparisons on it.
Yeah.
And we're young. We're working there. Maybe I get a little impatient. I feel we should move faster on that. I mean, it's life and safety.
You just want to make it a priority. I think that's the biggest thing, because we owe that to the firefighters really too, and the residents. It's a combination. There's a lot of people that you want to do that for. It's not just because of you or me, or it's for their safety as well. So.
Definitely. Well, one other thing I wanted to add was, just changing gears here.
Sure.
One of the things I looked at in the city was our ethics ordinance that we passed. Mm-hmm. The city, I mean, it was passed before I was on, 2009, 2000. I think all this tied into some scandals at the state. And it was, each municipality had to come up with an ethics ordinance. Mm-hmm. Going back and looking through this thing, there's a 60-day window to file an ethics complaint.
Really? I wasn't aware of that.
It's in the city of Mount Juliet.
Yeah.
And so I'm asking the attorney here, and I was like, so on day 61, are you okay? He's like, well, if they hide it, I think you have like 6 months or a year to get it. But if they just do it blatantly, and you don't notice for 60 days.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is highly unusual. So I'm going to be bringing up to change that. That's got to change. I mean, we've got to hold ourselves to higher standards on that.
And from that code, and you would know it as well as being a former employee for the city, I know we were held to a certain standard. And like you said, the code of ethics was one of those basically a high regarded standard that we are held to as employees. But one of the things I found that I was going through my research, and you might correct me if I was wrong, was that like the Board of Commissioners and elected officials are actually exempt from the code of conduct.
I don't know if it's exemption from the code of conduct, but I know we fall under the actual ethics ordinance that was passed as the city.
Yeah.
But to your point, probably if it's in the handbook, then it wouldn't apply.
Yeah, so it doesn't really apply to the city commissioners, which to me personally, as a resident, I would expect the elected officials to be held to the same standard. And I think we're on the same page there. Yes. That if you're an elected official or you're a city employee, you should be held to the exact same standard. From workplace harassment and unethical conduct and those different things.
I follow where you're going here on this. Now, this is just a problem in the way, I guess, the way the beast works.
Sure.
In that sense, you have HR somewhere, which I work. I get up at 6. I commute to Franklin every day. I work in Franklin and I drive back here. So I can be on video with you.
Yeah.
But during the day, I mean, I work at a company. I'm an employee there.
Sure.
And I fall under all those rules.
Yeah.
And the recourse is, if I don't follow those rules, I'm fired. Mm-hmm. I mean, ultimately, that's the recourse.
Yeah.
Then when you deal with elected officials, there's no staff in there that can come to me and say, James, you're not following the code of conduct. Mm-hmm. I'm poking my chest. I hope it's not picking it up on the microphone. But you're not following the code of conduct. We're going to fire you. Mm-hmm. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
And I mean, you can't. I mean,
all you can do is recall an elected official.
You could do a recall on
which
that,
goes in election commission, really.
Which would spawn a vote.
Yeah.
That's the problem with putting the teeth into it. Mm-hmm. So some of that's voluntary, and some of that's defined under state law. Now, to enforce that is the issue on that. Mm-hmm. I mean, you could write me up, and that's just not going to happen. An elected official's not going to get written up. Not that it would. You just wouldn't put staff in that to go back and. It would just be wrong.
Yeah,
it'd be wrong to put them in the situation, not the behavior.
Sure.
But that's where the state was insisting on the ethics part of the ethics commission to be put in place on this thing. And that's why it's so important to circle back on that thing and get it opened up into a more reasonable window.
Absolutely.
So there is, and I think a lot of times it would take citizen involvement to point out that, the behavior of Susie, Jimmy, or whatever is not up to par on this.
Yeah.
And if you get into this and you study this, this activity could be looked at as illegal, or this activity that's going on could put the city in a negative light.
Exactly.
Either through workplace harassment or you name it.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's where you would look at, say, like you're saying, a citizens board or something like that, where you put together an ethics committee.
There is a standing ethics committee
reviewed
now.
that, but it's not appointed by, say, the mayor, who he appoints. Most of the committee members to a lot of these things have to figure out a different way of appointing, say, the ethical committee to review that, because it's like if you look at the situation now from the code of conduct, if right now it's City Manager Martin, I believe, is the one who kind of reviews a lot of those complaints along with HR. But if there's a complaint filed against him, where does it go?
That's a good point. I would assume to HR.
It goes to HR, but then you have, say, that in that case, you have the HR director who reports to the city manager. So where does, those are some of the questions that you could look at. And it's in having a committee, like you said, like a commission, like an ethics commission, they're like a civil service type commission that looks at it and says,
see, we do have a standing ethics commission right now. It's a 5-member board.
Yeah.
And each elected official appoints one person to serve on that.
Oh, okay.
And there's some state guidelines about their level of participation in, I guess, political activities or so. But
sure,
that's there, and that's probably you make a really good point there in the fact that the recourse would then be to. I mean, in the past it's been the Board of Commissioners, but that's been, there's no appeal now to the Board of Commissioners on that. And perhaps the Ethics Commission is the right spot for that to go.
Well, yeah, absolutely. And you have enough citizen input. If you get some like a citizen committee, like you were saying, that looks at that tasking and reviews those, because right now I think it goes to I believe, and I could be wrong, I was under the understanding that City Manager Martin was the one who reviewed those kind of complaints and dealt with those himself, but you could have a conflict of interest
There is
in that position.
There is a review process for that. I think they're filed with Kenny, but he's not the one, or Mr. Martin. They're filed with him, but he's not the reviewer for it.
Okay. So, but yeah, that's an excellent point for sure.
Well, the other thing is, I just say this before we jump into the questions. If you haven't subscribed to the newsletter, it's on the website. There's a place there to subscribe. The other thing is the subscription to the newsletter. There's alerts. You may have seen some of that when like when we had that item get deferred out here, and I'm just sending out alerts to a geographical area surrounding that, and I'm able to target.
Yeah,
it's been deferred.
Excellent. Yeah.
And then we had this going on the other side of town, and another item got deferred. And was able to just target them. Hey, it's been deferred, guys.
Yeah.
So, and I know
them a trip, right?
I know it was an important issue to them. Mm-hmm. And they're probably like everybody else, got a lot to do.
Well, especially if you want to go, and I know from personal experience, nothing's more frustrating is if you want to go and attend a meeting, either the planning commission or the city commission, and you get there and you find out secondary that the committee, or the actual meeting's been deferred, and you didn't know about it until you got there, or if the developer pulled it off the agenda, and you basically earmarked, like you said, everybody's busy. And they block time to go to that because they want to go ahead and participate in that process. And then
it's a football game last night.
I know. You missed the national championship game.
I missed the first quarter.
Missed the first quarter. Anyway.
Time well spent, though.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just saying that, the newsletter, the alerts. Let's jump into questions. I know I saw the first one here. Okay. Say hi to Teresa. She said good information.
Yeah, hi, Teresa.
And we got Chris asked, could you explain the email ordinance and that you're working on and the status of the action? Oh, we actually had a workshop. Struggling for the word workshop, but we had a workshop last Thursday and went through that on it. Once we get through this workshop, it's going to be back on the agenda for a vote. And what this ordinance does is it just simply says, if you're an employee, if you're a vendor, if you're an elected official, you need to conduct city business on your city email. And I'm not anti-Yahoo or Gmail or whatever. I mean, I don't know if you see that. I got Gmail here. It's my personal account on it. But I'm not anti those things, not the purpose.
Yeah.
But those communications need to be captured into a system that the citizens or whoever needs to can do public record requests, and it's all there in one spot.
Absolutely.
For them to get that information. because the people that vote to put me and others in office deserve to know what we're up to, what we're doing.
Sure.
And a lot of people say it's like watching sausage be made. Well, you should know how we pick the ingredients to go in the sausage.
Yeah.
So that's the goal with that. It's an ordinance that costs nothing. We already have the systems in place to archive it. This is essentially a policy change on it to say, use your email. To me, it's not asking very much.
Yeah.
There's some comments made at the last meeting. It's like, well, the last time it's come up, it's like, well, email is only a fraction of the communication. And I'm like, there's a limit on this thing. And and my approach to this is, just because this doesn't cover everything doesn't mean we shouldn't do it.
Yeah. Well, I think we discussed that last when we first had gotten on the agenda. Again, it goes back to transparency to me, as an elected official. If we're spending money, city tax money, to fund email accounts and these different communication devices, number one, you're being paid for, and they need to utilize those communication tools. But also because it goes back kind of ethical to me. If you're conducting city business on your personal account and it causes issues on Freedom of Information Act requests and things like that, I don't understand really from a citizen, if an elected official or anybody who this covers would have anything against it. It's kind of, to me, it's kind of almost like an ethical thing. I've asked why do you want to fight this?
The pushback I get is this doesn't cover all forms of communication.
Okay.
Which just total transparency here. Nothing is going to. Doesn't matter what I put in writing in paper.
Yeah.
There's always another app. You can go so far as see as people communicating in video games and the chat boards in there. I mean, where do we draw the line on it?
Yeah.
And I tell you where I picked the line. It was where it didn't cost the citizens anything, and it wasn't overbearing on the employees.
Yeah.
Now there's an effort. The complaint is it doesn't cover texting as well, and it doesn't. I've been able to just voluntarily take my texts, any of them that I thought covered any business. I mean, I got one about a tree that was blocking someone's line of sight. Since I was forwarding that on to Public Works and the city manager to be addressed with, I forwarded the text on to my mailbox, so it got archived in there. It was easy.
Yeah.
But I was doing it because I just wanted the record there on it.
Sure, absolutely.
Now, the push to move this agenda on this thing to require texting on this, and there's nothing wrong with making sure texting's archived. The problem is we can do it automatically, but it's going to cost money to put that technology in. It's not something we're doing now.
Yeah.
And I've seen numbers anywhere from several thousand to $12,000 or something dollars just to capture that. Now, you could require everybody to do it like I do, where you just pick the ones that got city business on it and you forward it to your mailbox.
Yeah.
And that's fine for elected officials, or that's fine if they just want to require me to do it in the law. But I worry about the burden it's going to put on the employees.
Sure.
And instead of just saying, just do business on your city email, now you got text out there on it, and the employees in the field having to deal with that.
Yeah.
Because when the extra steps, like when you require an extra step for me, I mean, you're paying me a set rate every month anyway.
Yeah.
If it costs me more time, it costs me more time.
Sure.
If we got people on the clock, we're an hour. How much do we want to pay people to fiddle around with text?
Yeah.
That's just it. That's my only objection to it. I got no
because the only
problems
other
with
way you could
archiving
solve, like even if you went to, say you added it for certain level employees, for instance, if you went to say cell phone, cell phones or things like that you use your cell phones as part of your elected office or whatever that you had to do conduct business. But how are you gonna watch that? I guess how are you gonna watch? What kind of watchdog is gonna be watching that?
Yeah.
All right.
Well, we got another question here from Clay. He says, how can the city approve a $250,000 clock tower but can't afford to keep a quality fireworks show for the community? That's an excellent question,
That's
Clay.
an excellent question.
Well, this city can spend $250,000 on anything it can get the votes to spend it on.
That's right, pretty much.
And the history on that was, we had a gentleman here who made a donation to the city for $250,000.
Yeah.
And the discussion was that would go to the RTA park.
Yeah.
Now, RTA wasn't too agreeable to do anything in the RTA park because where the clock tower goes now, that land is owned by the RTA.
Yeah, so it's their property.
So it took a long time to get that. So then we voted to spend that money on Robinson Park.
Robinson Park, yeah.
And we didn't spend it all, but we have $75K come back. So when the clock tower come back, the vote was made to move money out of the hotel motel tax into that to do the clock. So they were some that felt the clock was a donation, and they were others who felt
As it was communicated, as some people thought it was communicated that it was the whole clock project was, yes, a donation, but it actually did involve some funds, tax funds, and I know at least I saw some feedback regarding people asking, is a clock tower considered a park? Because there's really, other than a bench being, I think that there's a bench maybe in the design somewhere, but how that was actually considered a park. But then it's like you mentioned the RTA property. Now, if the RTA decides to sell this parcel for whatever reason down the road,
we get a contract.
Oh, there's a contract. We're going to turn that over to the new landowner. It's a lot of interesting questions. I've seen a lot of things on social media regarding that.
Yes, of our needs, I don't know where a clock fit in there necessarily, but
If you're sitting at the light and your cell phone or your car is not working, at least you have a clock to look at.
and don't get me wrong, it's going to be a nice looking
Oh
clock.
yeah, I think the design looks good, and yeah, I'll just leave it at that, I guess.
And another part of the question was the fireworks.
Yes,
we have
a good question,
The
Clay.
city has budgeted as much as $30,000 a year in the fireworks show, and I think last year, I'm going to shoot off the top of my head and maybe get right.
lying.
Well, it was $15,000 last time that was spent down at the pop art.
Okay.
We technically had 2 on those things.
Yeah.
And I know one of the things that was discussed in the last workshop, not the last workshop, but the workshop before that one, was proactively reaching out to, I don't want to pull his name in directly, but we'll just say the gentleman in town who loves to shoot fireworks. And
Owns a landscaping company on Lebanon Road, that one?
potentially.
Yeah, potentially.
Working
Another
with
shout out.
Yes.
Yeah.
Working with him in advance
Yeah.
about getting the fireworks show done on it and not making this a fiasco this year.
Yeah. Well, and he's been, not mentioning his name, has been a very, very high regarded citizen of Mount Juliet.
He's been very generous.
Very generous over the years, and maybe it's something we look at for even the Parks Board. It's something that we utilize for maybe parks or recreation.
No, I don't
know.
I don't know if he's been reached out to or not, and that's I don't want to go.
Go
into
there.
it. But I know
that's
it was
for our next broadcast, right?
Yeah, I can safely say it was brought up and discussed, and I thought it was a wonderful suggestion instead of just waiting. And I mean, we all pretty much know when we're going to shoot fireworks. It's the day of, the day after, would rain or not, and it's
Somewhere in
gonna
the
be,
first week of July.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the 4th or the 5th usually. I mean, this is not rocket science to figure out.
Absolutely.
And why can't we work this out now instead of getting to May and saying, oh, we don't have anywhere?
Yeah, it's always better to be proactive than reactive, I guess, in some of these events. You know, it's like you said with the Parks Board, you know, you got them, they're designing these events. It's something that you want to start dealing with now. You don't want to wait till Memorial Day and figure out, oh, do we have a 4th of July fireworks show going?
Yeah.
You know. So,
And I mean, it just,
good question, Clay.
yeah, very good,
question.
Clay. Andy asked, can we as a city look into building a Costco or BJ's wholesale to the city? No, we can't.
Yeah. You could probably reach out to him, I guess. That's probably what normally would happen. You
Actually,
almost
he
have to-
did not say building. I misread. He said bringing.
Bringing.
I was going to say, well, the city will not build it.
Building on, yeah, turn it over to them.
But yet, I will say this: we have reached out in Costco, and Costco knows they're very welcome here. It's a business decision by Costco. If they choose to come here, they're more than welcome. They would have to go through the same requirements as everybody else to come into Mount Juliet, but they're welcome to do so. I think we as a community position ourselves well to attract business like that. I'm kind of surprised that someone hasn't shown interest at this point in it.
Well, and as many people who have been asking about Costco's and Whole Foods and all these I don't think it's not for the effort from the city level. It's more of from a business plan from their standpoint, looking. Because I definitely don't think they're pushing to say we don't want Costco here or we don't want a Whole Foods here or anything else. So I think it's definitely a business decision on that company's part, I believe.
Yeah, and it's just, we want to do what we can to make it a business friendly environment in here and make people feel welcome to come and bring those types of businesses here. And quite honestly, as the guy who has to go through the budget, I want to see the tax revenues that it generates instead of it going somewhere else, because going back to emergency services, infrastructure, and all that, because all that pays, that goes back to paying for the community and that stuff. So I welcome Costco. I have had some private conversations with them. They've expressed some reasons why they looked at us. And I know, gosh, I don't want to misspeak, but I believe with the last place they went into, they were heavily incentivized by local government to do that. That's just something Mount Juliet has not done, at least that I'm aware of, to do any type
We're in that
of
position when we actually need revenue. We can't keep giving away the city, all this city land.
It just becomes where does it end type thing. We attract one, the next one comes, and what's the recourse if it doesn't produce what they say it was?
Yeah.
It's a private entity. You're not going to take it back over as a city.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and it's like you look at, say, like community or developments like, say, Gander Mountain was an example. They came in here, spent a significant amount of money building the building and everything, and financially didn't work out for them. They pulled out, and we're just lucky that we got Hobby Lobby to come in there. But we built a Costco warehouse, which, granted, some people probably say, well, if you've never seen a Costco warehouse go out of business, but you could be the first. You don't want to be the first. So
and that's just it. The city does not pick the individual businesses that come in. Through zoning, we set up zones where you can do industrial, you can build houses, you can do commercials, and there's various flavors of those types of zones through there. But we set those up and try to make it as welcome as possible on it. And Andy, I hope that helps. They're welcome, and it's not for reaching out for them that they're not here. But all right, Sharon asks, why does Lebanon have more commissioners if Mount Juliet is the same size? Well, that is a good question. Lebanon is actually, and any city that exists in the state of Tennessee is first chartered by the state.
Yeah.
The city
Here's
doesn't.
What I found.
And Siri found city charter for me. Thanks.
Alexa area.
It's not listening, Sean.
Yeah, right.
But Lebanon's
Siri just responded for you.
Yeah,
so
I know. It's like
you can't falsify what you're telling the taxpayers. Caught you in a
supposed
lie.
to be truth. But each city in the state is chartered by the state itself. So we exist by the authority of the state of Tennessee.
Sure.
And by saying that, when the city is formed, it's formed under a charter. And there's various charters. Mount Juliet is what I call kind of a modified home rule charter. We have our original charter that we were granted by the state, but we've adopted home rule, but we haven't put in a home rule charter per se over that.
Yep.
But Lebanon has a different charter altogether. It's called a private act, which private act just means that it was a vote by the state for that one entity, privately for them.
Yeah.
So they're under a private act charter. So the charter that formed Lebanon said that's the number of commissioners you had, or it laid the path and the framework for how they would add or subtract.
Sure.
Mount Juliet started off with the way our charter was written. We started off with at-large commissioners, and I believe the number was 3 when it originally started. And from the 3, they were all elected at-large. They selected a mayor from that group. And then when we hit a population threshold, we went to districts. And so that formed the 4 districts that we have now, and then a mayor elected at large. So I say all that to say it's defined in state law as the size of the number of commissioners, the way it behaves with the population, and those things. Mount Juliet has the ability to amend its own charter since we're a home rule by referendum.
Sure does.
Lebanon, if they want to change theirs, they would have to actually petition their state legislatures to carry an act to Nashville, the State House, pass it there, signed by the governor, come back, and they would adopt that act.
Well, and you look at how Lebanon operates their city as well, where the mayor is was a full-time Mayor Ash over there in Lebanon. He's a full-time employee with the city of Lebanon and actually conducts the day-to-day business in Lebanon. Where obviously our city, we ran by a city manager, so we did different styles there. Where I think a lot of it, like you said, just depends on the actual city itself as to how they want to function the best. Where with the city of Mount Juliet, where we have our 4 commissioners are in the district, and then the mayor technically has 1 vote, but he's more like an at-large alderman.
Right.
So, but all the cities have a lot of control as to how that is done, but that's pretty much how it.
And get the next question here says, would you please quickly review again in words the average person why when Mount Juliet as a smaller property tax pay for services and operations, but the new residents and businesses and their additional property taxes don't pay for the additional services, their respective operations. I believe what's being asked there is why when you see more houses come online, that it doesn't cover that. Well, yeah, and it's a good question. You see here when Mount Juliet originally started out with a property tax, and I'll go back in time just a little bit here, but initial property tax rate was set at 20 cents.
20 cents, yeah.
There wasn't like studies done or people contacted us how we got the 20, how we arrived at the number 20.
That was from a
Rural Metro.
Rural Metro.
Rural Metro come in.
That's what they said that they could provide us fire protection for.
Exactly.
So that's where our 20 cents came from.
You have a good memory on that one.
Yeah, we were both. Yeah, I was around then. How you put it that way.
So when the property tax was originally passed, that property tax was not passed to fund the fire department.
No.
It was passed for fire protection.
Yes.
And we believed at the time that would deliver enough money to work with the county to enlarge fire services here.
Yeah.
In response, the county, and I'm fast forwarding here a little bit, passed Resolution 7611, which said if Mount Juliet did anything to improve fire services, they would remove services from the city of Mount Juliet. So you kind of knew where you stood with the county. You're not getting any service.
We weren't going to get nothing.
And if you do anything to make it better, we're going to pull what we got out.
All we have, yeah. Redistributed our services, basically what they were going to do.
So then we took the money that we had saved a few years on that service, and we started the Mount Juliet Fire Service. And quite honestly, we put together a plan that would work for a few years. And once it got going, we immediately made changes to the thing.
Yeah.
We set to start out with two people per shift. We immediately jumped to 4, which was the right thing to do. We said we were going to use trucks. We didn't because of the maintenance on those things. We leased to own, I guess is the right way, but purchase on the trucks that we have now. So we changed a lot of things in there, but we never adjusted the rate on that thing.
Sure.
And you say, well, the growth comes in and it brings more in, and that's very true. But our property tax, sometimes you'd be concerned. Our biggest contributor to the tax in the city is one of the apartment complexes up in Providence, and the whole complex brings in like 30 grand a year.
Yeah.
And this neighborhood here, its assessed value brings in about 60 grand. So as we grow, and we're about, by all calculations, down about 12 people, you take one neighborhood will almost pay for a guy.
Yeah. And that's where the whole thing is, and that's where the reason we looked at doing a combination system initially in the beginning, because of the funding source, the personnel cost was so significant.
Yes.
So we looked at trying to be as lean as possible with the money that we had. It wasn't that we weren't looking, and now we're at a situation that we're trying to expand again without having a solid revenue source, where we're going back to where we're talking about the general fund part. So, like, and I say being asked here, why are they paying additional taxes? Is what
why don't they pay additional taxes? And they are.
Yeah.
And they're paying an assessment per the house when it's being constructed on that. They're paying additional cost.
Yeah.
And I did and not just going to fire, but I did all the fees and the taxes and such. So a new construction, and doing the math on my house, I would need to pay our property tax rate for about 80 years to make up what one new house comes in for as fees into the city.
Yeah. So we're getting some money. We're not giving it away. We're not giving the town away, no.
No, and the goal's not to raise taxes out there, but the point is what we have coming in doesn't cover everything we need in terms of emergency services.
Yeah.
And the same year that we're laying off or reducing our fire staff,
Sure.
we're running a $3.6 million budget surplus.
Exactly.
But by the way our funding system is laid out, and that's just the choice of the commission,
Yeah.
you couldn't use the surplus to that.
Which it could have been an amendment and made that happen to reallocate those funds, but it was at the time a choice by a few of the elected officials, namely nameless, that said they didn't want to fund that. So
And you know, there's many ways to arrive at where you need to
Sure.
on this thing.
absolutely. Hopefully that answers your question.
Shane asks, who's up for election this year? Well, everybody but me.
Everybody with you.
And
It's going to be an interesting 2020, put it that way.
And you know, District 4 had Commissioner Apston resign, and so the person appointed there is just serving out that term until the next election cycle, which is causing this unprecedented situation where you have everybody up. It's usually 2 people, 2 years, and then 2 more years you have 3 people.
Yeah, it's usually staggered, so you don't have a complete turnover of the commission at 1 year.
So everybody but me.
Yeah, let's get a day. Oh, you're off, right?
Yeah, I guess. Clay says, how many parks in Mount Juliet does the city actually own? Good question.
Let's see, that would probably 4?
Well, we have.
Well, we have 5. Well,
Technically,
let's
we
see.
have 2 real, I call them major parks.
Yeah,
Mundy
Charlie
Park
Daniels.
and Charlie Daniels. Then we have several pocket parks.
then you got Robinson Park.
I'm not going to try to name them all.
Yeah,
But I think when they asked actually
How
own,
many actually
they're
own?
probably referring to the one on Mount Juliet Road in Jones Park, which is not city-owned property.
okay, that's actually,
The owner of the property allows the city to use that. And
Okay.
maybe that's what the question is referring to.
So ones with actual facilities, Clay, it would probably be Mundy Park and Charlie Daniels Park. Actually, you have, say, like Mundy Park has some ball fields and things like that, and then Charlie Daniels Park has the community center. But other than that, the rest of them are, like he said, are pocket parks that have limited services.
Yeah, and it's like Robinson Park is designed to be kind of a low-profile, limited service park.
Yeah,
That one is
More of a
owned by the
more of a
city.
walking path more than anything.
The dog park up in by Rutland Elementary is definitely owned by the city as well.
And then the Ethan Page Park on
Ethan Page
It's-
Park is owned by the city. The Frisbee course through there.
yeah, that, and then and Eagle Park as well. I guess you would consider Eagle
It's
Park
owned by the city.
and then the Greenway. So yeah, there's were we up to 6 or 7? I think there, Clay, as we're kicking it around. Yeah.
And then Charles says, when can we vote on getting a pool?
That's still a subject at the park board, isn't it?
It's still a subject with the park board. When we had the last workshop on the subject, it was basically kind of 3 or 4 options were put out there, and some of the commissioners wanted more time on it to research it and go back through some of the past studies on that.
Okay. Was there any past studies on?
Yeah, there was
okay. So it's rare.
Partask, or I'll butcher the name, but
Yeah.
a Partask study that was done. And I don't know that it included necessarily anything about an aquatic center, but it was kind of the overall scheme and where does it look at. That study's very old. I'm not sure how relevant it is to this, but
Okay.
you know, I don't have a date, and I'm not going to guess.
Would it be something that you could put on the ballot? If you had like an aquatic center or something like that the citizens could vote on for funding of something like that?
You could. It's tricky.
To get something on the
You
ballot.
really, from what I understand, you can't put like questions out there, kind of like you'll see in California, like the proposition, whatever. There's not really a mechanism for that
Okay.
to do it. You could do a charter amendment, but that's not really. That would almost be the equivalent of, in U.S. terms, saying you're going to build a highway and putting it in the U.S. Constitution.
Sure.
It's not really the place
That's
for
true. But it'd be more of a budget request more than anything out of the parks. But you'd have to, not steroids, I guess you'd kind of call it that, to have an aquatic center.
Yeah, and then Ralph asked, would Mount Juliet elected officials consider putting Mount Juliet are consider putting forth that Mount Juliet is a Second Amendment sanctuary city. Not just consider it. We did it. I sponsored that 2014 or 15, I believe. The 15, I believe. I sponsored and passed that. I believe that passed 4 votes with 1 abstention on it.
Okay.
So, Ralph, we did it before it was cool.
Yeah. We're proactive.
We lost money for fire protection by the county going independent. So is the county? Yeah, I see this question. Is the county lowering its tax rate because they're no longer paying for fire? The answer is no.
No.
And what are we doing with the money they used to pay for? Well, that's not a simple. That is not a simple question, but it is a good question just the same.
Asking what's the county doing with the money that they say that they're used to properly fund Station 3? Is that what I'm getting here?
Well, if now the citizen, I believe where this question is going is where will the citizens of Mount Juliet are now paying a property tax. And that's bringing in about $2 million in revenue a year.
Yeah.
That $2 million that they're now paying, they weren't paying when they were getting services from the county.
Okay.
That's very true.
Yeah, that's very true.
Now, if you went to the county and you said, I'd like my money back, and then say, well, I don't owe you any because you didn't pay for the fire service that you were getting to begin with.
Yeah.
And gosh, I don't know if you remember these discussions on it.
Yeah,
but
and that's a hard question because the way it looks at it, and a lot of times, as much as Wilson County, I guess you want to look at it and say, well, we're city residents of the city of Mount Juliet, but we also are Wilson County taxpayer. We also, just because we live in the incorporated areas of Mount Juliet, we still are county taxpayers. And what happens, and especially in the fire protection issue, is that in a lot of those discussions back then, if my memory serves, and I haven't started losing my mind yet, I don't think, just maybe some of the small details at times, but what ends up happening is that when a city looks at it and says they want to give a higher level of service than what you're getting from that county entity, a lot of times it's kind of on the city to, it's like a city services that you're just taking on. In a lot of cases, the county's not going to give you money, kind of like giving you a rebate on your taxes.
yes, well, there
pay for that.
is a mechanism for doing it through fire tax districts, but that is action that would have to occur at the county to do it, to introduce those fire tax districts. And if you remember, Chancellor C.K. Smith back in 1995 ruled that the county had to do the fire tax districts, and it was due to the city of Lebanon was not receiving those fire services.
Yeah, so we started fighting it.
So at that point, what happened was the county moved to, there's a section of state law 101, and I can't rattle it off my head anymore where it's located, but it's 101, and it refers to
GCA codes.
It's referring to the county, in lieu of fire tax districts, they can use what's called situs-based taxes. And I'm sorry if I'm rambling too far here, but situs-based just means taxes that are collected in a specific location. So taxes that are collected outside of the city limits, they can earmark for fire protection. Now the sticking point is, and where the debate really got into is you guys don't collect enough situs-based taxes. And that's just it's just a term for money collected outside the city limits. Somebody, I think, beer sales in spots outside the county, and that may not even be accurate, but that's one of them defined in that's one defined in law. Some of it's TVA in lieu of taxes. That's a fancy word for property taxes that TVA pays for. So they can take that money and allocate it towards fire services in lieu of fire tax districts. So that's what the county is using, those situs-based taxes to pay for fire service. And of course the debate is you don't collect enough situs-based taxes to pay for WEMA. So at the time, I want to say the situs-based taxes covered, I don't know, roughly 10% of the cost of WEMA.
Okay.
So in order to justify 10% of the cost, they looked at the call volume and they said, well, the station behind City Hall, 90% of the calls are medical and 10% of the calls are fire. Therefore, they got the state to agree with that, and that's where we're at now on the funding of it. Now, you could just as easily stand in front of the fire station and look and say, 2 guys on the ambulance, 2 guys on the fire truck. Fire truck probably costs more than the ambulance. You look at it from a personnel standpoint, you're like, it's closer to 50-50 you can make the argument on. But that's that's where we stand with why that money is not coming back in
back.
the fund of fire tax districts.
Because even though they didn't start, in most people who weren't here, say you weren't here prior to 2013 when WEMA was operational, when FDMJ went operational in September 30th of 2013, we drastically increased our level of service just more or less overnight in a 12-hour period from what they have. So WEMA didn't pull out they didn't pull out any services here. They're still stationed here, but they're just the response districts is outside the city limits. And we still utilize their services, more of the EMS services, like you mentioned. Most of their call volume is the EMS. So we still utilize WEMA for those services. So it's not that we completely quit getting any service at all. We stopped utilizing them as a regular call volume for fire-related emergencies, but we're still utilizing them for EMS.
For EMS, and they do a great job.
Yeah,
on that.
they're very highly respected. So.
On the books,
On the EMS side.
yeah. On the books, though, the property taxes collected in the city here, the county would show you that that's going to pay for those 90% of those costs.
Yeah.
That's the argument of
Yeah,
it.
that's it. Hopefully that makes sense to you. We go a little deep in the weeds and go back in the history a little bit, but hopefully that makes somewhat sense to you.
I'm not sure it makes sense to me, but
It doesn't make sense to me either, but it sounds
that's the way it
good.
is.
It sounds good.
Ralph said, I thought that was against sanctuary cities. That was a separate one, but that was done as well, Ralph. So you've done both.
So we were proactive in that one.
Well, I said I was going to try to make them shorter, and I made them longer. So
Yep. So we're about what? We're at an hour and a half right now.
yes, we are.
Wow. How much did we go last time?
We were spot on
About
an
an hour
hour
and a
last
half?
time, so I'm going the wrong way.
We got two. Let's see. Do we have any more questions out there? Any more questions? Last call for questions, right?
I don't think I missed any, but
No. Some of the questions, like Charles asking about the pool and some of those things, there's a lot. We could spend probably a couple hours on that discussion. It's the same as the fire protection issue, that you could spend a long time discussing a lot of these things. And
the answer on
yeah.
the pool is could be summed up in a sentence or two. Mm-hmm. If the Board of Commissioners wants to do it, it'll get done.
Yeah.
If the Board of Commissioners does not, it won't get done.
yeah, and really, that's in general. And it's like we always tell the residents, and I say myself as a resident, I'm not an elected official here or a city employee anymore. But looking at it is reaching out to your elected officials, reach out to the mayor, reach out to your elected city commissioners, reach out to the Parks Director, Rocky Lee, in the Parks Board. It's all on the City of Mount Juliet website. If you go to the City of Mount Juliet website and look, you can find the Parks Board information there. But reach out to them and keep communicating your wishes.
And and I made a very blanket statement on that too, saying if we want to do it, we'll do it. But ultimately, that's how things get done.
Yeah.
But there still really are a lot of questions still about it.
Sure.
It's very conceptual at this point. It's just like, is this something you want to go down to? So and just to kind of sum up that meeting, it was like, hey guys, I want your feedback on should I do it?
Yeah.
And the feedback was, you need to give me more information before I can figure out if you want to do it. Mm-hmm. But it could have gone just as easy the other way. I mean, he could have come in there and said, I've done all this homework, and it said, well, we didn't want to do it. Why'd you waste all your time? So
Yeah.
it's a catch-22 on this
Exactly.
thing. So, I mean, I guess if you're going to err, err on the side you haven't spent a lot of time or money on it.
Sure.
So,
If you got the support, you want to work harder towards getting it. Sometimes you don't want to take the hard road. Well,
Yeah,
it depends on what it is,
I mean, there's still a lot of question out there, and I mean, like I
yeah.
said, cost is the main one on the thing.
Yeah.
And no, I have no doubts there's a support for it. Mm-hmm. It's just the cost, the insurance questions, where will we physically located, and we're just scratching the surface on those things.
Yeah.
And
Well,
how does
and
it
then-
fit in with other priorities?
And then, like you said, a lot of people, you see the feedback of people talking about, well, we want a Jimmy Floyd Center, here. And, trying to get information on that as well, It's just a lot. There's a lot of behind the scenes work, if you want to put it that way, towards getting those numbers.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, I guess the answer is we're not close at this moment, but
Yeah.
it's moving in the works at least.
all right.
Well,
So
I don't
think we have any more questions. Oh, we got a couple.
thank you for taking the time today. Well, you're welcome. Thank you. Yeah.
I guess we were close. We people are thanking us for our
Yeah,
answers. So.
they're ready to see us shut this down. So.
Yeah, they're like, can you please turn this off now?
Again, I mean, Sean, thank you for taking an hour and a half
appreciate it.
Of your time.
I'm always welcome to come back. I appreciate the invite. So.
And I know you've got history with the city through the volunteers long before you were ever an
protection.
employee. I mean, you've been an employee there. You've been the training officer. You've done all that. You've seen the nasty side of budgets and
Yeah.
all that. So you've got a unique perspective on that stuff. And I mean, you've really, and I mean, it's me saying this to you now. I mean, you've really done well. You kept a positive attitude through all this, and reflects well on you. I mean, and you're still, I mean, unless I'm wrong, I mean, you're just as committed to your city as you've
yeah.
always been, and it's.
Well, and I never, and like we've talked in the past, you know, I've been involved in the fire service issue in Wilson County since 2007. So when I moved into town, it was one of those things that I saw a need, and I have a unique set of skills, I guess you can put it that way, by saying I've been in the fire service and being a veteran firefighter and having that drive. Like a lot of people ask about certain projects here. I'm like just the taxpayer that wanted to, you know, keep pushing along and kept pushing for change. So you want pools, like we talk about pools and city services and things like that. I was a resident just like everybody else.
Yeah,
I just
I guess I'd
made it happen.
I'd say you've carried yourself honorably through the situation that you were doing, and I've noticed. I know other people notice, and it reflects well on you. And nothing positive to
I
say.
appreciate that.
Again, thank you for your time. Thank you for everybody that's joined us out here to watch this. We'll get the feed of this posted on the website as soon as possible. Feel free to share it. If you don't, give it a thumbs up, share, whatever. Send me feedback. You don't like it or whatever. We can work. This has been all flexible through the whole
You
time.
never want to see us again. You never want to see me return. Put that in there.
Thank you guys. Thank you everybody for your prayers especially, and for allowing me to serve. And again, just thank you.